Okay, so we're going to finish up chapter 3, lesson 3 and 4 today, so we'll move a little bit quicker. So we talked about people coming to America, the Pilgrims, the Puritans coming here for religious freedom, and they were setting up these colonies in the land that was already inhabited by the Native Americans. We're kind of taking it from them. So how this worked is the King of England would just give land away to his rich friends and people who he liked, which is a pretty easy thing to do if it's not actually your property to give away. I mean, it doesn't really cost him anything to say this land is yours now if it belongs to somebody else. One of the first colonies he did this with was Maryland. He gave it to a guy named George Calvert, and George Calvert died. And then his son ended up taking control of Maryland. Even though he was a Roman Catholic, he wanted all religious groups to have religious freedom. And he got something passed called the Toleration Act. And this allowed religious freedom and, started equality in this colony. So, opposite of the Pilgrims and the Puritans, he wanted everyone to be able to worship freely, not to have to conform to the one religion he wanted. The Pilgrims and the Puritans and their strict rules were causing a lot of problems for their colonies, and a guy named Roger Williams, he's part of the church, he basically tells them, hey, you guys are being too strict. When he speaks out like that, they come after him and they're going to arrest him. So he runs. He ends up starting a new colony called Rhode Island. Another group of people ended up leaving the Pilgrims and moving towards Connecticut. They were led by a guy named Thomas Hooker. Thomas Hooker was a pastor too, working with the church. And Connecticut is unique because they were one of the first colonies to have a written constitution. And a constitution is basically the outline of all the rules and laws. So if you look at the map today, we don't have one state called Carolina. We have North and South Carolina. But when Carolina first started, it was one place. The King of England gave this chunk of land to a rich guy, and there ended up being some squabbles and some arguments over the territory, and Carolina got cut into two pieces eventually, North and South Carolina. So New York didn't belong to the British people at first. It didn't belong to the Dutch people at first. It belonged to the Native Americans. And what happened is the Dutch people came and took it over, and then the British people decide they want it. So King Charles says that New York is his now. The Dutch people have a decision to make. They can stand up and they can fight against the King of England and the strongest army in the world, or they can give up their land. And they end up giving up New York to the British. Pennsylvania, right next door to us, is a unique situation too. So King Charles was in debt. He owed tons of money to people. He owed this guy, William Penn, an enormous amount of money. So much money, he was never going to be able to pay him back. So what the king did is he paid off his debt by giving William Penn a huge chunk of land. How nice would that be to be able to pay off your debts by giving away stuff that's not really yours? But William Penn was a Quaker. He believed in equality for all people. Georgia is another unique one. So the King of England is throwing all these people in jail for little crimes, giving them life sentences for these minor offenses. And the jail is full. He is out of space. The jail is filling up quicker than he can cut off the people's heads and get rid of them. So a guy named James Oglethorpe comes up with a solution. He tells the king, hey, let's take the people in jail and send them over to America, make them live in Georgia. So these prisoners were sent out of jail and sent to go live in Georgia in America. So the 13 colonies are set up and they're growing, and more European people are coming to these 13 colonies. It's not easy to get here. If you guys remember talking back just a couple of lessons, it takes 3 or 4 months on a boat to get here sometimes. And these boats aren't like the cruise ships we know today. They don't have running water. They don't have refrigeration. They are nasty, and it's a difficult trip. At first, most of the colonists were English, but other Europeans start coming over to America for religious reasons. They see America as a place of refuge, and refuge means safety. The English settlers started to be a little bit concerned that they were becoming a minority, meaning there was going to be more other Europeans than there were English people. So American life is becoming closer to what we know today. Farmers clear their land, they plant the crops, merchants are selling their goods and their products. And just like today, there's different classes of people. There's wealthy people, there's middle class, and there's lower class people. And there's a group of people called indentured servants. An indentured servant is someone who owes money, and they have to work to repay that debt. So if you think back to the Pilgrims when they signed that contract to work for 7 years for the London Company, that would be indentured servitude because they got to work to pay off that debt. I can't imagine giving up 7 years of my life working for someone not to get any profit and only to get a ticket to go live somewhere else. During this time, the homes were very simple. Most of these houses were small, like one-room houses. They're a cabin. They have a fireplace, which is for warmth, and it's for cooking all their food. Houses are very, very small. They basically have one room, and that's where everybody sleeps. So it's a living room, bedroom, kitchen. It's all the same thing. And if you got mom, dad, you, and 5 brothers and sisters, everyone's sleeping in one bed. The food is really simple. They have no way to refrigerate the food to preserve it. So the only way they can stop the food from going bad is to dry it out and smoke it and cover it in salt and basically turn it into beef jerky. Now, the people who were coming over here weren't very healthy. They didn't know a lot about what caused diseases, and they thought like a lot of illnesses were from bad spirits and things like that. They didn't know about germs and bacteria and viruses the way we do today. And think about it. If somebody got sick and you have your entire family sleeping in one bed, that illness is going to spread very, very quickly. So the 13 colonies are divided into 3 separate regions. The northern colonies, or the New England colonies, it's up north, it's a little bit colder, and the soil is rocky. And because of that, they can't make as much money off of farming. They can grow some stuff, but they can't grow crops like you can down in the south. They make most of their money off of building ships, cutting down trees, fishing, and making stuff out of metal. The southern colonies are the ones that are going to be making tons of money off of their farmland and their plantations. The main things they were growing were rice, indigo, and tobacco. And tobacco is a very valuable crop for, making the money, because Spain was the only colony selling it up until this point, until we got it. Indigo is a bluish flower that's used to make like a blue dye. And it was very expensive. And the indigo was important because rich people would pay a lot of money to get this blue dye to show they had wealth. It was basically like them flexing, same as somebody wearing a gold chain with diamonds on it, showing off their wealth. If you had these bright bluish purple clothes, it meant you were rolling in dough. They also used slave labor to increase their profits on the plantations. The middle colonies, not super cold like the north, not super warm like the south, they were a mixture. They had some farming and they had some manufacturing, but the main crops they were growing are going to be grains like corn and wheat. And because of that, they became known as the bread colonies. Okay guys, so we just finished up chapter 3. I need you to go into Google Classroom and you're going to knock out the worksheet for chapter 3, lesson 3 and 4.